Hi, my name is Tammy Spellbring. I am the Deputy Director for Clinical and Treatment Services at Behavioral Health Services Division under the Healthcare Authority. HCA is dedicated to making the state of New Mexico trauma-informed, beginning with ensuring our staff is trauma-informed. HCA is providing training with Dr. Bill in what trauma and informed care is that is based on SAMHSA's concept of trauma-informed approach. There is an increasing focus on the impact of trauma and how service systems may help to resolve or exacerbate trauma-related issues. These systems are beginning to revisit how they conduct their business under the framework of a trauma-informed approach. SAMHSA worked with trauma experts in research and treatment, as well as trauma survivors, to help craft a definition of and concepts about trauma-informed approaches that would be relevant to public health agencies and service systems. Referred to variably as trauma-informed care or trauma-informed approach, this framework is regarded as essential to the context of care. These areas include a comprehensive working definition for trauma that includes the 3 E's of trauma: the event, which is the traumatic situation, the experience, the way someone emotionally responds to the event, and the effects, both the short-term and long-term outcomes of the event. Also, the 4 R's of trauma-informed care, which include realize, recognize, respond, and resist re-traumatization. 6 guiding principles to guide us in approach and treatment that include safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. Through these trainings, HCA staff will have the information and tools to interact with others both internally and externally in a trauma-informed manner. Thank you and enjoy the training.
So let's explore how we feel about change. And we're going to do it with a search for quotes, unless you have a quote already that you prefer. And I think I actually gave you some change quotes in a handout. So HO4, or handout number 4 that you received from Alicia, has a bunch of quotes on it. And as a matter of fact, I can open that up and let you see, because that is sort of a good discussion launcher as well. I'm fighting with my screen right now. Let's see what happens if I do that. Yep. Okay, so now you have a bunch more of these change quotes. And what I'd like you to do is think about which one do you, which one resonates with you? Which one do you think describes change the way you think about change? And so take a peek at that and see what you think. And oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. I have to figure out how. I'm sorry. Interesting. Let's do that. There it is. Okay, so here are some change quotes. And so take a look, and I want you to, and you have another option, and that is you can jump on your phone or on the internet and see if you can find a change quote that resonates with you, okay? And because we're going to discuss change for a minute here. And I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to either find a quote about change that resonates with you or pick one of these. And then I'm going to put you into a breakout room where you're going to share your quote about change and why it has meaning for you in your small group. Okay, so this will be our icebreaker, get to know you sort of event for this training. And think about your change quote. And let's talk about systems, shall we? So you are part of a big system, and you have to adopt to changes. And when you do, when changes happen in and around you, there are a lot of things that have to be attended to, right? It's not always easy to adapt to change. And change can be both inspiring and overwhelming. I mean, some of the things that have changed in our workforce and in systems like your system is good, right? We want to change with the times. We want to evolve and get better. And so that's one way to think about changing, but it can also be pretty overwhelming when it feels like Costco and it changes all the time. Just when you get used to something, there it is, changed again. I encourage you to think about and to let me know what's changing in your system right now. What are some of the changes that you've seen come down the pike that you've had to uh, adjust to, or even felt like you wanted to push back against that you didn't want to do that change? Does anybody have anything that you can identify in your system that you have to cope with in terms of change? Our job typically, in whichever one of the systems that we belong in, typically we're trying to get the right services to the right people at the right time. If I had to make some sort of global statement about it, I would say that's the thing that hasn't changed, right? How do we get the right things out to the right people at the right time? And when we have to learn new programs or new protocols, or we've changed things so much that we have to write new policies, change can feel overwhelming and a little daunting. But if we think about it, we have the potential to shift how we do business and truly improve people's lives. And that is, it's got to be why many of you are in the systems, working in systems to try to be part of a positive change movement. And I have to say, in my opinion, and you are welcome to disagree with me, if we worked in a system that never changed, I would say that system's pretty broken and stuck. That human beings we're evolving and ever changing. And if you work in a system that doesn't accomplish some change as you go over the decades, then it's probably stuck in the wrong time, sort of thing. So while I'm not accusing you of being in that situation, I think that sometimes this instinct to like hit the brakes and be like, no, we don't have to change, or I don't want to change, or this worked for us last year, why can't we just keep doing it the same way this year? I think there's a inclination for people to want to stop change or to limit change. But the truth is, change is all over the place all the time. And so I'd like you to think about what's already changed in your systems, even in your tenure, whether you've been there 1 year or 10 years. Have you seen policies and procedures change? Have you seen standards rewritten and rules changed? Certainly, I think as we get down this list, we've all seen new services and programs pop up and sometimes disappear again. And hopefully we're hanging on to the ones that are most impactful. And then finally, have we seen a change in either our workforce or our clientele, the people that we're working for and with, right? And have we seen a change there? As a matter of fact, I just got off a consultation call with a group over here in Ohio, who was talking about, I just don't recognize the workforce anymore. I'm not sure how to help them do the things they're supposed to do. They are simultaneously have a perfectionistic streak and think they ought to be perfect at what's going on, and want lots of support and cushion because work is overwhelming and of course laced with trauma exposure. So they want to do it all, but they would like to be protected and buffered from some of the impact there. So change, it's all around us. And it's, kind of one of the reasons we're here today. So on top of all our talk about change, we have current events going on in our world. And those include ongoing public health concerns. What's going to happen to us next? We can't possibly think that pandemic was the last sort of weird thing like that we're going to see. How about workforce crises? Are we filling all the openings and positions we have? Does our workforce feel strong and stable? There are wars all over the world. Some we know about, some we don't know about. We continue to be in a world of global warming and what's that doing to our environments and then to the people in those environments. We seem to be slipping a little bit and losing some of our human rights in terms of our political landscape. And honestly, the list just doesn't seem to end, right? There are always these sorts of concerns. And you may have thought of some that I haven't thought of. And feel free to add any ideas you have about what are some of the current things that feel very stressful and crisis-like. Because it all boils down to that last bullet point there. It is a dramatic, emotional, or circumstantial upheaval in somebody's life. And so little changes are kind of like practice for big changes, but we're really talking about the big changes and the things that leave us feeling unsettled and maybe impede our ability to either focus on our work or actually do good work. So we want to be alert and aware that we don't live and work outside of current events. You live and work inside of current events, environmental, political, social, personal. Okay, so change always, and things shifting around, and we have to sort through it. What feels like a crisis when we underwater, like that picture there, and what feels like I can cope with this, or this is actually a change for the better. That would be nice if we felt like a substantial amount of it was. So, coping strategies. If it's true and we're trapped in this world of chronic change, and I do think that that's pretty much how we are, how do we prepare for or adapt to these massive changes? How do we deal with it, honestly? And I will say that there's a fair number of people who would like to just stick their head in the sand and not think about this at all, but we're going to think about it for a minute. And I'm going to tell you a little story about a woman named Jane McGonigal. And I don't know if anybody recognizes that name or not, but she is pretty well known in her own right. She also is a psychologist. She's a social researcher. She's a gamer who developed online gaming simulations for different things. She's written a couple of books. And I'm going to tell you that in 2010, hear that loud and clear, she predicted COVID, the pandemic, almost to a T. And accidentally, she wasn't trying to predict the future, but she was hired by a company to create something called a social simulation, which is where you get thousands of people to spend several days or weeks on a fictional social network and figure out how to work things out and get along and solve problems and what is the world like inside this social simulation, which is an online gaming event. So she created this social simulation for a company, and I think it was a banking company actually, about why do people invest in certain ways or things. And she did end up having literally thousands of people go onto this social network and sort of live through these events and things that she imagined back there in 2010. And it was imagined for 10 years in the future. She said, pretend you live in 2020 and got people to all imagine the same future and gave them scenarios about what played out there. And one of the most popular simulations that she created was for the World Bank, and it was set 10 years in the future. And they asked her to imagine a series of cascading global crises. And how would people feel? And how would they react? And how would they try to adapt? And would they try to help other people? And guess what? It all started with a respiratory pandemic out of China. And then pretty quickly, they threw misinformation and conspiracy theory into the gaming simulation platform, and they called it Citizen X. And Citizen X group started to spread all kinds of crazy information, and people couldn't figure out what was really going on. And they weren't trusting the government, And then they started experiencing historic wildfires on the West Coast due to the climate change that was happening at the same time. And all of these things were happening on this gaming platform. And how were you going to how would you work? Would you work from home? Would you be going places? Would people be locked into big pods or little pods? All these things were being worked out online. And they went through then they did a lot of research and surveys with the people after the simulation was over. After a few weeks, they said, okay, thanks for playing. Now we know how humans might respond to some of these things. And they collected a lot of research and wrote some papers and thought about the future and what should we be looking out for, etc. Then 2020 happened. Then the pandemic happened for real a decade later. And people started early, late 2019 and very early in 2020, they started reaching out to Jane McGonigal and saying, hey, what's happening here? Did you have some connection here? Is this really happening, or is this a bigger simulation? At first, they were panicked and overwhelmed that this simulation was like out in the real world. But they were saying the world looks exactly like we imagined it when we were on that platform, and what is going on? And they were paying attention before other people paid attention, because they told her, ever since that game, pandemics have just been on my radar. It's like I pick up the information faster than other people. I notice the changes faster. I notice what's on the news faster, and I pay more attention to them. And other people were still like, nah, that's got to be a weirdo thing that's happening. I'm not really paying attention yet to that. And so they're writing to her in January when most people were not really thinking this was going to affect them outside of China. And they were saying things like, this has been terrible. I feel like I experienced less anxiety and depression than my friends and family because I'm less shocked, because I already thought about it. So it didn't take me as long to accept the reality of what was going on here. And so Jane went back and studied, recontacted the people who were participating and asked how did they feel during the announcement and the rollout sort of the pandemic. And most of the people in the simulation avoided getting sick and having problems more than the rest of us because they had already thought it through. They had already imagined that this had happened. And when they do that, they felt more positive about it. They were like, well, this is awful. This is really bad stuff. But because I've already thought about this and played it out in my mind a dozen different times on this game platform, I feel like I know what to do now. I feel like I know what all the options are. One woman said, I knew this could happen. I saw it coming. And it made them feel smarter, and it made them feel prepared. Many people reported feeling capable, confident, and powerful, even during the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was kind of like, what is happening, or really freaking out, frankly. So having that be your brain's first reaction to a new situation, that, I've already thought about this, what can I do about it, allows people to feel less shock, to not go into lockdown or be frozen, to not stick to denial in the beginning, like many people did, and to get on with adapting and helping themselves and others. And so why this story? Why am I telling you this big story about the pandemic? Because one of the coping strategies is don't put your head in the sand. Try to use your imagination and think about, what are the possibilities here? What if something like this happened? Then what would we do about it? This is why we have emergency procedures. We actually pay people to think forward to emergencies, and then what would be the process for us to save ourselves, to help other people, to feed people, those sorts of things. But too often when things seem strange and overwhelming, we do not want to hear about it. We do not want to focus on it. And somehow we think that if we don't focus on it, it won't happen. But the truth is, things, really, really awful things happen, right? we've had trauma-informed care trainings together, and we know that a lot of people are exposed to a lot of things. And it would be better for us if we could think through them and what are all the possible ways that could be supportive or helpful or trauma-informed when we have to do that. So, so this is just your first strategy for how do we cope with things. And that is, don't pretend it's not happening and go ahead and imagine the worst case scenario. Nothing also stops you from imagining the best case scenario. Okay. And you can do that as well. There were people in that scenario who were creating new communities and helping others and doing other things. There were also people who refused. They were offered a way to avoid the pandemic on the online game, and it was masking. And of course, there were people online who refused to mask. Nope, I won't even play that I would wear a mask because I don't like masks and you can't breathe well. And I'm not sure I believe the science, and all the things that happened in real life happened on that platform. So if we could, we shouldn't be, I think the bottom line here is we shouldn't be afraid of thinking through the hard things. It makes it less hard when we're living through the hard things. And so, just the first strategy and what we should do about the fact that, gosh, things feel very tenuous and constantly changing for us. I will tell you that she has a book out called Imaginable: How to See the Future Coming and Feel Ready for Anything. And so if you're interested in that story or in Jane McGonigal, she's a very interesting writer. She also has a website called Urgent Optimists. Urgent Optimists. And so they're looking into the future and trying to figure out what's out there and how can we look at it early and get ready for what's coming. So how does that make you, that little story, how does it make you feel about your workplace and how changes come down or are presented to you? One of the things that we are going to talk about is how much transparency you have in your workplace and whether you know why things change. And are they telling you in advance so you can get ready for it? Or is it just like, oh, today's there's a new rule kind of thing? And so think about your organization and your part in your organization. And do you have any power in terms of not reading the future, people? This isn't magic, okay? But in predicting that, what if this didn't work? What's our backup plan? Those sorts of things, okay? So where do we go from here and what's in our toolkit? We've undergone a tremendous amount of change in the last few years, and we need to learn how to take better care of ourselves and better care of our people and our clientele as well. And I want you to think for a minute about, how do you know when you're stressed out? Because you're a player in all of this. It's not just always about the other people. So how do you know when you are stressed professionally or personally? How do you know when you need a break or when you need to change of scenery? Maybe you need a completely different career path or something. But I'm sure most people have questioned things in their lives. And where do you go from here? What do you do about the fact that change is inevitable, and we have to either live through it or find a path around it, right? And so think about, how do you know when you are sort of reaching an end point here? I'm too stressed to be helpful, or I'm too stressed to make positive changes. I'm just reacting to things. And then after you think about that for a second, can you see signs and symptoms in other people when they're stressed out or when they're not taking care of themselves? What might you see in your teammates and your coworkers and your supervisees that indicate to you that they're overwhelmed, they're stressed out, that they're struggling? Well, how does this show up in your workplace? And how does it show up in your teams, your groups, whatever you call them? And I'm going to wait here for a second to see if people have some ideas about that. What are some of the signs we see that tell us this is not okay? It's not going well at the moment. And you can feel free to put it in the chat, and you're also welcome to speak aloud. I see a couple of chats. Calling in, I assume that means calling off. Less productive, taking more time off. Body language, okay. Ooh, emotional outbursts, yes. I happen to know there's more than 30 of you on the call, and I'm thinking you don't work in tiny little silos where you don't see this. So you probably see people stressed out on the job occasionally. You know, Bianca, indecision or deferral of decisions is one of the most bothersome to me personally. When I start feeling like I can't make a clear decision, I call it decision overload, I think. I'm incapacitated there momentarily. I'm like, I can't make a decision. I just feel so overwhelmed. And that's a sure sign in my own self, in my own body, that things are getting out of hand. Oh, trying to isolate yourself, being in isolation, feeling overly sensitive. Maybe your response or your reaction to something seems bigger than it needs to be. Maybe that's a sign of that overly sensitive self. Other examples that I've heard from people who work in social service systems like we do is when your colleagues or you start being negative about the families that you're serving. You tend to say almost like it's rough and they deserve it because they're not doing the right thing, or but anyway, they're not as supportive or understanding. They're more negative about it. How about this? Anybody ever procrastinate? Don't finish that report. Don't turn that paperwork in. Say, it'll just have to wait till tomorrow. I'm burnt out right now, etc. How about arriving late to sessions? Whether it's your session with your supervisee or a session you have with your customers. And then honestly, can you sometimes just look at people and be like, they look tired, they look worn out, they're not as bright and vibrant as we know they can be. So I'm just going to remind you of all these things that you've said, and I see more popping into the chat. Physical signs, eye twitches, yes. And laugh of laughter. Alicia? Lots of laughter. Oh, like hysterical laughter?
Sorry, yeah. Like they don't
Yes.
have humor. They're just too serious all the time.
Yes, yes, yes. So all of these signs are signs of trauma and stress, right? They're not necessarily like medical signs, but they're signs of trauma and stress. And we have to see them as signs of trauma and stress and not just bad behavior, right? These aren't just grumpy people for no reason. These are signs and symptoms of trauma and stress. So we can't just be irritated with them or say it shouldn't be that way, or with ourselves. If we're feeling lousy, if we're overwhelmed, we need to acknowledge that and do something about it. And remember, trauma and stress responses are not just bad behavior. You're almost compelled to feel and behave the way that you do when you're stressed out. So today we're going to work our way through these 3 areas that are related to workforce and optimal functioning, okay? One is multi-system collaboration, which can be tough. I don't know about you guys, but it can be tough to cross the aisle these days. We're worried about whether or not people agree with us or disagree with us, those sorts of things. And the same thing happens in teams and in systems and in organizations. And so we're going to talk a little about multi-system collaboration. How safe is your workplace? And we can think about where your workplace is. Are you office bound? Are you in a building? Are you out in the community? Those sorts of things, because there's a lot of differences there. And then, of course, your self-care as well. So we're going to unpack all of these over the course of the next just over 2 hours, I guess. And let's start with multi-system collaboration. So the catchphrase with collaboration is nothing about me without me. And that comes out of client and patient movements that say, don't have meetings about me and what you're going to do. I should be included in that meeting. I should know what all the options are, but I might need help understanding all of them. But still, we shouldn't be having a lot of meetings about people or things that don't include the people that we're talking about. So as we go through this section, let's not forget about the youth, adults, and families that we all serve, because they should be included at all levels. And when I start talking about systems and organizations, same thing is true inside your organization or your system. There shouldn't just be this small, this minute group at the top who makes all the decisions and the rest of us just have to cope with it. They should include, that should always include people in the decision-making meetings who the decisions will impact or affect, or you don't have enough feedback to know, are you making the right decisions? Are you making good decisions for the people who depend on you? So inclusivity should happen at all levels, but certainly with the families that we work with as well. So there are a lot of different service systems that can get integrated into our care system, our system of care. And first of all, just take a look at that and let me know where you sit, where you come from. Am I missing a chunk? Because I don't work inside your system in New Mexico, and I want to respect that and make sure that if I'm missing something, it's included there. And I try to include the all three levels: children, youth, and then adults and parents. Okay. And these are the,
only
yep.
thing I would add to that is the judicial system. You say juvenile justice. but
You're
it
right. Yep.
doesn't cover, that doesn't cover grown-ups.
It's true. It's true. And what would you call that system, Karen?
Judicial involvement.
Judicial. Anybody else? Did I miss something? And what would you call it? I'm gonna get right in here. Let's call it Justice Department at the moment. One of the tricks is states call everything different depending on what state you're in. But you're right, I had it labeled as just juvenile, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. We also call Children's Services, incorporates both our child welfare system and our jobs and family services kind of thing over here. So that might be broken into different chunks for you guys. Anybody else have any that I should be adding or checking on? All right, let me go back to here.
Would elder care qualify, or would that fit under behavioral health care and healthcare?
Well, unless you have a separate, complete separate serving system that deals just with elder care, I would say it probably does sort of, comes out of different parts. Certainly it starts with healthcare, I'm going to guess. But then what about elder services?
We have aging and long-term care as a separate organization.
Thank you, Mary. So that makes sense to me as well. And so I'm going to take a note on that one. Say it again, Mary.
Aging and long-term care.
Aging and long-term care. Thank you. All right. So in order to really integrate our systems and our services, we have work to do because we kind of float in and out. Sometimes we'll partner real well with one or another service, and then we sort of fade back into our own work. And we do have our own jobs, right? We have things that we're supposed to be doing, and we want to pay as much attention to that as possible. And yet, I want you to think about this. What do you think you might need to know about each of the other services listed here and more that we listed? to work collaboratively. What might you need or want to know about any other system if you had some crossover between the people you work with and the other systems that they're involved in? And I could just ask, does anybody think that you don't have crossover, that these are really separate siloed things? Because I want you to understand that many people who are involved in any one of these kinds of service systems are often involved in multiple, not all of them, not all of the people and not all of the systems, but if you're involved in one, it's likely you're involved in anywhere from 2 to 5. Does that make sense? And so there's a lot of reason to think about collaboration. And the more we could collaborate on an agency level, on a provider level, on a sharing resources and services level, the easier that becomes on the people that we're working with. As opposed to, well, I've got to go do all this stuff over here at this system, and then I've got to go over here and take care of the things in this system, and they might not be communicating or even asking me to do things, or even worse, asking me to do things that will get me in trouble in the other systems somehow. That it just, yeah, you can have a lot of, you could be given a lot of direction from people that isn't helpful. Oh, being homeless. Yes, thank you, Cynthia. So we want to figure out how can we work more collaboratively with the other systems versus I'll do my part over here, you take care of your part, okay? And our paths probably won't cross, except they do cross in the people that we serve. And they are being sort of buffered around between all these systems. And wouldn't it be nice to have some sort of overarching understanding about that? So let's think about what we might need to know. So the goal here is to know just enough about each of the systems to be collaborative and not competitive or conflictual. And this is a short list of things that I think would be helpful to know about each of the other systems. So what is your system's purpose or goal? Like you have sort of an overriding mission, right? In child welfare, they want to eliminate child abuse. It's pretty simple, okay? It's a complicated system, tons of moving parts in there, but they do have this overriding purpose and goal we want to be aware of and try to eliminate child abuse and neglect, okay? How about mandates? Do systems have mandates? And actually they do. Lots of systems have mandates, make this happen. And what are their mandates? And that pretty much helps you decide what direction you're supposed to go with your system. And then within the system that you work, there are rules and standards. And they're probably at the state level and also at maybe county or local levels as well. And sometimes those, even within our systems, we can feel like there's a lot of conflict or things aren't done as consistently as we would hope. Every system says something about client rights. But did you know the client rights are not the same across all the systems? And so it depends on which system you're in and who's written up the client rights and have they been updated? You know, we went through a huge, not the pandemic anymore, I'm not talking about that, but since 1990 to now, trauma-informed care has really shifted how behavioral health care thinks about services and also some of the other systems as well. And so the final one there is challenges and barriers. What kind of challenges and barriers do we run into when we work with systems? When I was doing intensive home-based work, going into families' homes and doing behavioral health treatment with them in their homes, often I was in the same homes where child welfare workers were monitoring things and checking on things. And sometimes they wanted me to tell them, was the boyfriend really living there? Did I notice if they had enough food in the refrigerator for the rest of the week? These sorts of things they're not the sorts of things that I think about when I'm doing behavioral health treatment, but they were definitely important things for the child welfare workers. And, but it would have been, honestly, it would have been inappropriate for me to cross that kind of boundary and report on my own family to a different system. And so we had to work through that we were trying to work collaboratively, those two systems. And that was a challenge because they're looking for different things than I'm looking for when I'm doing my job. And so one of my questions to sort of wrap this slide up is how did you learn about other systems? Did somebody teach you about other systems? Is it just what you learned naturally by bumping into other systems? Have you worked collaboratively with other systems? And where do you think we should learn about this? For instance, I'm doubting anybody will raise their hand, but did anybody get a course in college about how all the systems work? Because I never saw it. No, but it's been a minute since I was in college. So, but I wonder about that. I wonder about, if we're pumping professionals out to do system level work, do we teach them about all the systems and how they can be collaborative or they can be competitive or conflictual? So there's a lot we don't know. And my recommendation is if your department, if your team works with clients who are regularly involved in other systems, learn these things about the other systems. Then you can work more collaboratively together. And it doesn't take you books or multi-hour trainings. It might be a 15-minute conversation with somebody from that system to explain to you how they view some of these things and what's going on. So think about how you could be more collaborative or at least understand more about some of these other systems. If you're going to try cross-system collaboration, you want to use strategies that are going to facilitate that success. Okay. And so here are some ideas for you about how to work with other systems and things that you can keep in mind. Okay. So the first one is to assess and problem solve any barriers to successful functioning in each life domain. So we're talking about working with our families and what we need to be aware of with other systems so that we can help them as much as possible. Adults, youth, and families, okay? What barriers are they hitting? How do they see the system tugging them in different directions? And how can we be successful together? You can educate other system providers on needs that you see. You work in a system, you know your own system. Could you educate a different system? Often when I would go into the school system, for instance, I would spend some time talking about not revealing the inner secrets of the family that I was working with, but talking about how they have appointments to schedule and attend, and how we view some of the problems as trauma and not just bad behavior, and just kind of letting them know what's our perspective on things and how we have to hold things confidential. And there are things that we're not going to share with them, but there are also things that we can share, and we can share things about our system. So we can educate other system providers on how to work best with us, and then vice versa. They might be able to help you. How do we set up achievable expectations and goals? So we want to make sure that the standards that are written for us may say that success looks like this or has this goal, this outcome. But when we're working with real people, we want to make sure that it's stepwise and that it's sequential so that gradual improvement moves them in the right direction. And those are more achievable than saying, we need everybody to graduate from high school in this county. Well, that's a great goal, probably never achievable because nothing is ever 100%. And so how do you work on increasing the likelihood that you stay in school and graduate? And so think about how do these big lofty goals that each system has, how do we make them achievable with very appropriate intermediate goals? We can assist in building positive community relationships, how we treat each other in public meetings and how we come together and work on problems together, it's sort of, what do I want to say? It starts at the top and it filters out. And so we want to make sure that we are respectful and engaging and transparent about what we're doing and what we need and want for our service system to be successful. You may need to coach your clients through system navigation. If they are involved with multiple systems, then how can you help educate them about the other systems, or could you pull somebody in to help with that? One of the biggest complaints that I personally have, and I think exists in the United States in our systems of care, is that there's no coordination across them all. And so the family's left to try to figure out, what can I get from this system and what can I get from that system? And it can feel very piecemeal. In addition, though, teaching the people that you work with self-advocacy skills, teaching them to articulate their needs and their personal goals, can help them get what they need out of any one of the systems or supports that they can find in their community. Can we be part of facilitating positive connections in all these different environments, including the people that we work with? Is there a way for us to help them make better and more positive connections? And one of the things that I find most helpful is to find places where people feel successful and in control. So where can they go to feel like, whew, I'm doing okay in this part? Too often when we see people, it's because they're falling apart and their lives are difficult at best. And so one of the ways to help them is to remember that there are almost always places and contexts where people do feel better and feel more successful. And can we work that into how we interact with the people that we're working with? And I'm curious, one question I have on this slide is, each of you can think for yourself, what do you think is easier? Engaging client or family engagement, or system engagement and collaboration? Easier to connect with that family and do work there, easier to connect with other systems and work with them? It might surprise you what that answer comes out as. Yep, Karen's right. There are a lot of inconsistencies about who's covered by what programs. Oh, one person said systems and the rest are saying family. And the question was, which one's easier? I think the tendency is to think that the family's a little bit easier because it's smaller. It's a smaller system, but it's still a little system, isn't it? The family system. All right, thank you for those responses. I'm going to move on. So what I want you to be, as you, and this is the last slide on this part of the training. So we've been talking about systems, and if you feel like, Bobby, this is like beyond my work scope right now, and I'm feeling overwhelmed and stressed because you're telling me I should fix all the systems and it seems out of my reach. You can be a great system advocate person, though, even just for your own system. Remember that information and data is your friend. Don't get upset or mad when people are like, I think the statistics say this. I think we should be thinking this way. Just look at the data. Find out what data you have and let it speak for itself. And remember that information is your friend. You should try to know the purpose and parameters of every system that you touch, or that the people you work with touch, so that when there's confusion about what you get from who and how that falls down, you know the purpose and parameters of the other systems, and you can tell them. I am not an educator, and yet I know that people have a right to have an educational plan for kids with special needs, right? And so I learn a little bit about that so I can refer them to get the right things for their children. You want positive engagement with all of the systems because that sets a tone for success. Being mad at another system because they didn't treat your customer well, it never gets you very far, okay? Being curious and trying to find out why it didn't go better might get you a little bit further. So try to stay positive, not negative or blaming, because that is a much more successful tone. Build relationships. If you build relationships with other systems and other system workers and people, that'll help you right into the future, because then you'll have somebody that you can call or touch base with and be like, hey, remember I talked to you a year ago about something and now I'm wondering about this thing. And you'll have sort of an inside line to how can we interpret what's going on between our two systems and what can we do about it. But to be a good system advocate, you have to be flexible and open, because people may say things to you about your system that you're not thrilled about. And it's okay. It's just more data. Really? That's what you thought? And you can use that and talk about what parts of it feel true or right to you and what isn't. But you do have to stay flexible and open and not get defensive about any criticism of your system. And finally, know that conflict is part of negotiation, right? You wouldn't have to negotiate if there weren't some sort of conflict. I wouldn't be telling you to go be a cross-system advocate if the systems all played together in the sandbox super nicely, right? But we have to work together for the good of our communities and our larger world. So remember, there's going to be some conflict, but it doesn't have to be bloody and ugly. It can be a disagreement. It can be, we're going to work out how this happens, or we'll take turns, or this becomes the priority because it's a safety issue. So think about when you run into a conflict, how are you going to negotiate it? And if you're not going to negotiate it well, if you're going to be a hothead and get all defensive about things. In every single system, know the rights and protections for people with special needs. They exist in all of the systems. And advocacy is not about winning. It's not about you winning the conversation. It's not about you proving your point. It's about the people that you're working with being successful in their lives. And making other systems mad at you or them is probably not going to help that. So we really have a lot invested in having good system advocacy and help. So I want you to think for a second about, can you think of any reason that you would have to work across the system? Or is this falling in dead space around you right now? Because some people get really, I do my job and I just do my job within this system, and I don't want to have to think about other systems. But can you think of any time that you would have to cross system lines to solve a problem, or to get a family other services, or to get a person enrolled in a different program that's not under your purview, that sort of thing? I want you to think about when it might be. Yep. You guys, at least Alicia is saying you do work with other systems periodically. And so my question to you would be, how well do you manage personally, each one of you, how well do you manage multi-system collaboration? Do you think you're good at it? Do you think you avoid it? Do you think it's helpful? Do you think, I don't know. And you don't have to answer this one out loud. This is about you personally. I just want you to understand, in your roles, working within a system, you should know about cross-system stuff. And if you don't, where can you get that information? Because remember, it's not at college. It's going to have to be somewhere in the real world. Yeah, we're going to start off on this topic next. Psychological safety. When it's safe to speak up and ask questions. So one basic definition of psychological safety is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or even mistakes. Okay? This is rough. This is rough, and we wouldn't even have a topic like this if people didn't struggle with it. And how do we maintain psychological safety for our groups, our teams within our system? Because in order for them to go out and be strong workers and advocates in our communities, they have to have a home base where they feel safe, where they feel like they can come and learn things and grow and ask questions and do that sort of thing. So we're going to spend some time talking about psychological safety at work in particular. Okay. It's a shared belief held by members of a team that others on the team are not going to embarrass, reject, or punish them for speaking up. So I want you to just think for a second. The people in my circle of work, how do they treat me if I make a mistake or if I ask a hard question? Or how do they treat others? I've seen them treat others. And do they, how do they treat them if they make a mistake or ask questions or sort of, just interrupt the flow? Sometimes that's the problem. And don't forget, it's not just what is said or done, but it includes the nonverbals. Is there somebody in a meeting that everybody's always rolling their eyes? Oh no, here she goes again. That sort of thing. That's not that safe, right? And so I want you to think about how you are treated and how you treat others, and include verbally, physically, emotionally, socially. How much of our message isn't the words, it's how we behave towards them. Okay. So let's unpack. Yep. Just keeping an eye on my time here. Let's unpack psychological safety in the workplace. Okay. We're going to do, I'm going to give you this. People, when you have psychological safety in your workspaces, people feel comfortable being themselves. They don't feel like they have to show up shiny and proper all the time. They bring their full selves to work and they feel okay laying themselves out on the line. So some of this information, and I'm citing it right here, comes from the Center for Creative Leadership, but it's pretty standard definitions when I started looking around for psychological safety. There are 4 stages of psychological safety. So psychological safety isn't like something you just set up once and it's a done deal. It sort of evolves and goes through some stages. Like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which shows that all humans require their basic needs to be met before they can reach their full potential. Employees have to feel accepted before they're able to contribute fully in ways that improve their organizations. So some of this information comes from a man named Timothy Clark. He is the author of a book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, Defining the Path to Inclusion and Innovation. Employees have to progress through the following 4 stages before they feel free to make valuable contributions and or challenge the status quo. Now, I definitely know we all want employees to make valuable contributions, right? We want them to do great work. We want them to help the people that they're serving. We want them to be polite and respectful to the people around them, and just make things happen, right? I'm not sure that we always think about it as we want them to challenge the status quo. But sometimes we have to challenge the status quo in order to make changes or see something different or deal with new problems. How we ran our businesses and our organizations back in the 70s and 80s are not how we run them now. And we had to, somebody had to challenge the status quo back then so that we could evolve into what we are now. And while you might not think this is the perfect place to be right now, it's probably better than it was 20 years ago. And so, so think about that. We're going to go through these 4 stages. And also I want to note the phrase on this slide is that a psychologically safe workplace begins with a feeling of belonging. And so in order to sort of dive into this, what I'd like each one of you to do, close your eyes or not, but I want you to think about when you were brand new to this system, this job, this role that you're in now. But brand new. So if you've moved around within your system or within your department, think about when you first got here and what did it feel like to you? It would be a little surprising if you felt instantaneously like you belonged, but I suppose you could join a group of people that you felt some comfort or belonging with pretty quickly. Or did you feel like, ooh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's accepted or what's supported or what's allowed. Were you excited about all the opportunities, or were you nervous about what the demands might be? A little of both. Just touch base with your younger self, your earlier self. And what was it like to come into a team or a program or the entire organization that you didn't have experience with before? And we'll go on to stage 1. So stage 1 is inclusion safety. And I'll read this definition on the screen for you. Inclusion safety satisfies the basic human need to connect and belong. So you're included. In this stage, you feel safe to be yourself and you're accepted for who you are, including your unique abilities and defining characteristics. So you're not accepted for who you are because you have the right degree or because you look and sound like the other people, which may be true. That's part of it, but you're really accepted for who you are when your idiosyncratic things are okay as well, right? So maybe you don't look exactly like everyone else. Maybe you didn't have the exact same pathway as other people. Although don't kid yourself, there really are no two identical pathways, right? Everybody's life journey has its own variation. So you land in a place where you're going to work with other people, and how did it feel for you? So the next thing I'd like you to think about is a supervisor or a teacher that made you feel accepted and like you belonged right there with that person. Get a scrap of paper. You're not going to have to do much with it, but get a scrap of paper and something to write with. And I'd like you to write down who was that teacher or that supervisor who saw you, who made you feel like, hey, this is okay. I'm going to like it here. So it doesn't have to be this job. Maybe it was a different job, or maybe it was a class at some point. Who was the person who made you feel accepted and like you belonged there? And if you have a bunch of these examples, just pick one. Write down that person's name on a piece of paper. Next, I'd like you to write down, what did they do or say that made you feel like you belonged? Do you have a single memorable event? Or more of a constant state? It was sort of how it felt in their space. But who was the person who made you feel like you belonged? And how did they do that? What do you think contributed to you feeling like, I belong here? This is a good fit. So let's move over to learner safety. So stage 2. Stage 1 was, oops, let me find the name of it, inclusion. So the feeling of being included or belonging. Stage 2 is learner safety. So learner safety satisfies the need that we all have to learn and grow. In this stage, you feel safe to exchange in the learning process by asking questions, giving and receiving feedback, experimenting, and this is a rough one for some groups, making mistakes. Some groups have a harder time than others, allowing people to make mistakes. Mistakes. You feel free to let me know if you're one of those people who's never made a mistake. But I'm here to tell you that everybody makes them. No one likes to admit it, And most people don't even want to take responsibility for the mistakes often. And why do you think that is? Why do you think we have trouble with this in our culture, our many cultures? Why do we not want to admit that we make mistakes or take responsibility? I want you to think carefully. Have you seen people get in trouble for making mistakes, be shamed for making mistakes, or be excluded for making mistakes in your life and your world? I'm not saying your current team. I'm not trying to get you to out anybody or yourself. I'm just saying we have a mistake problem here. We think that mistakes are awful things. And yet, I rarely have a whole day where I don't make a mistake. And do you? Do you have days and days where you feel like I didn't do anything wrong? I doubt any of you feels that cocky or confident. I bet we all feel like we make mistakes sometimes. And it's such a common thing in humans to make mistakes. It's kind of amazing that we don't tolerate it very well in ourselves or others. Have you been in a meeting where you had a question and you didn't want to ask it? Why not? Because it would be confessing in front of your peers that you didn't know the answer already. So sometimes we won't even ask the questions to figure out what the right answers would be because we don't want people to know we didn't already know it. And do you think that other people already know everything? Again, I keep going back to the common human experience that we all make mistakes, that we all want to ask questions when things don't make sense to us, that we all feel foolish sometimes when the answer is super easy or obvious. But I want you to think about why we get stuck in this position. How do people who make mistakes get treated? And can you identify in your team, in your space where you work, how people get treated if they make mistakes? And of course, there are big mistakes and there are little mistakes, but mistakes are mistakes. And maybe we should define mistake a little bit. Making a mistake is trying to do something or say something that you think is the right thing, and then it turns out it wasn't. Everybody does it. But how do we treat people when they do that or when they do it publicly? Do you have a personal story about how you've been treated? And again, I'm not asking you to tell your story because they're embarrassing sometimes and we don't want to have to tell these stories out loud. But I just want everybody to know how universal making mistakes is. And because we shame and blame people who make mistakes, people are afraid to try things. This is where it becomes a problem. If they don't know how to do something and they try it and they realize, oops, that didn't work, then they could try something different. But if they're frozen in fear of making a mistake, then they don't try at all. And they just wait for somebody else to do it or to tell you how to do it or somehow for that opportunity to pass without them noticing you. And this is really common, very, very common and super common in the workplace where mistakes might impact earning money, making productivity, getting a promotion, all those sorts of things that feel very heavy and important. But the problem is nobody really conquers, makes new discoveries, or does amazing work without a few mistakes on the way. And trying new things out of the box is one of the ways that we grow and learn. This is a problem in our education system for sure. We have classrooms full of kids who don't want to raise their hand and give an answer because if they say the wrong thing, they'll be shamed or people will laugh or people will think they're not smart enough. And meanwhile, everybody's sort of quaking in their boots thinking, boy, I hope I don't get put on the spot like that. I'm not sure I would get through it either. And so somehow we've got to see our way through this and and be different about how we treat and deal with mistakes in the world. I have no quick answer for you here. There's no one way to solve this part of the problem, except this: be observant. Watch in your large group meetings, watch in your small team meetings, watch when people participate with you. Are they willing to say wild and crazy things, and know that you'll take them at their word and offer them different ideas if you think that's not the right thing? Have you participated in rolling your eyes or shaming somebody for making a mistake? I don't know why they didn't know how to do that. That's ridiculous. I mean, I think we all have that kind of thing in us, but how much do you monitor it? And how much do you make sure you're not doing it in front of people who are vulnerable and who want really to be a part of the team? So stage 2, the hardest part about stage 2, I think the learning part is easy, right? Give me all your information. Let me learn some more. I might ask a few questions. I hope I'm willing to take your feedback on how I'm doing. But really, it's this making mistakes that stops people from progressing. If they're afraid to make a mistake, they won't try things that could be a little difficult. And life is hard. We have to do hard things all the time. And so practicing doing hard things and failing is a really important task. I watched this rock climbing special one time, and the person was talking about, it takes some bravery to go climb on some of these. I'm looking at the rocks behind Natalie, for instance. We're talking serious technical rock climbing. And it takes some bravery to be able to go out and do that. But one of the things that they said to me that shocked me was they spent significant amount of time. Their anxiety was going up. They had this big climb coming up, and they weren't sure about all the details, the technical details of it. It was starting to make them nervous, which made them tense up, which made them less flexible and mobile as they're climbing. And they decided what they really needed to do was practice falling. I was like, what? You can't like fall off a rock face. It's a little dead end there. But they did. They would be tied up to some certain anchor, and then they'd practice their moves around a corner or through this crevice or whatever. And periodically would lose their grip, and they would practice falling safe enough that they were surviving things. And I was like, woo, now there's some bravery. But I wonder, perhaps we should practice making mistakes occasionally. Say the wild thing. Say the thing you know is not going to happen or is not going to be approved. But it's okay. We'll come back with some other ideas later. See if you can make yourself. One of the things I think that we can do during this stage, especially for other people, is not so much making a mistake on purpose, but putting yourself out there a little bit. And saying things that's a little edgy or makes people stop and think about it a little bit. Not just the status quo, not just what we know we're supposed to be doing or saying. And see, how do people respond? And can you help make it a space where it's okay to say things that aren't perfectly curated, that they haven't passed all the tests already? You're just putting it out there as an idea. So watch for the mistake factor. That takes us to stage 3. Stage 3 is contributor safety. So contributor safety satisfies the need to make a difference. You guys, this is total science. When we help other people successfully, we get positive neuro hormones in our brain that make us feel good. We get dopamine, we get serotonin, we get things that make us feel good because we made a positive impact. We made a difference in somebody's life. And everybody wants to feel that way. I often feel 2 things at the end of a training. One is exhaustion, because I've had to stay focused and I have to talk out loud all the time, and I'm watching all the little square people, and I'm trying to make sure I'm telling the truth and they're getting the information they need and all that stuff. And so there's some like, whew, that was a lot of stuff. But also I generally feel a rush of positive emotion because I'm like, oh, I did it. I hope it was helpful. I think they liked it. I got Natalie to laugh twice already. And so those sorts of things, when you're a contributor, when you feel like you're making a decent contribution, you really do feel good about yourself and being a part of whatever that group was that you were in. So you feel safe and you use your skills and abilities to make a meaningful contribution. And as a trainer in the system and as somebody who's very trauma informed, I feel that almost every day. It's a good thing for me. Okay. So for your groups, for your teams, if you're in stage 3 where people are helping, they're in a real groove. They have skills and they're helping their clients be better, and they're saying, hey, you have a client who's doing that too? Here's what I tried. Try this. Hey, everybody, I'm struggling with this thing. Anybody have an idea what else I can do to get this person pushed to the next step? That's and everybody sort of give and take and feeling like they're just in this contributor groove. And that's a really nice stage for everybody to be in. And there's a double bonus in that both the provider, the person who's doing the work with the clients and the customers, and the person that they're helping both feel good about what happened because they both feel seen. They both feel like they contributed to helping and getting something right. So this is where we want all of our staff members to be. But note that it's the 3rd stage. You hire somebody new, you think they have the skills, they aren't instantly a contributor. They've got to get a feel for how your organization or your team operates. So you have to invest in them in stages 1 and 2. They have to feel like they're welcome and they belong, and they have to learn everything about you and your system and your clientele or customers. And then we get to contributor safety. And then one more stage to all of this, and it is the challenger safety. So challenger safety satisfies the need to make things better. Who doesn't want to make the world a better place? I don't think you'd be in social services if you can deny that, okay? Because you're certainly not here for the giant paycheck. So I think you're here because you think helping people is the right thing to do in the world. And so with challenger safety, you've done your work. You've been a contributor. You welcome people into your team, and you want to make it better. You want to make it better than it was when you came in a few years or decades ago. Okay. But in order to do that, you have to feel safe enough to speak up and challenge the status quo when you think there's an opportunity to change and improve. Like perhaps we shouldn't treat people this way. Perhaps we should do this other thing. Perhaps we shouldn't haze newbies in all the areas that we do that in, right? We treat them extra harshly, see if they're up for it. Who needs that? That is not a cool thing. And so the problem with challenger safety with this stage is it can feel threatening to some leaders and supervisors. So some leaders and I saw that, Bianca. Some leaders and supervisors feel like they worked hard to get to their position and they deserve to be in charge. How dare somebody question them? They might interpret people who challenge them as disrespectful, rude, or disruptive to either themselves, the team leader or supervisor, or to the entire team or organization. Why are you questioning this? We've been doing it this way for a while. And so the problem is even if you were a great learner and contributor, and you see something that should be challenged, like we're trying to shift everything over to trauma-informed care, and you want to say, maybe we shouldn't do this thing, that would be more trauma-informed to do something else, but it threatens some people. And then again, kind of like the making mistake thing, they're going to try to shut you down or shame you, or put you in your place, right? So can you think about a couple of things. Because, of course, I'm going to put you in a breakout room again because I need you to talk with each other, especially because I can't get you to talk very freely with me. But I do think you're doing your little work inside your team, your small teams here. Here's the two things I want you to think about. Are you on a team? Do you have a small group or team where you work? And which stage do you think you're in? Okay. So you have the 3 stages. First is the belonging, then the learning, then the, oops, I forgot the word here, the contributor, and then the challenger. Belonging, learning, contributing, and challenging. I want you to think about 2 things and write this down again before you go. Who are you? In your current group, what's the best description of you and your group? Are you still a learner? Are you brand new and you're trying to find your place of belonging? Or have you been there a while and you try to be a challenger sometimes? Or do you like the status quo and you try to tamp those challengers down? So think about, who are you? Which stage do you personally feel in, like you're in? And what about your team? Are they more or less likely to speak up and challenge the status quo, and why or why not? Okay. And if you say no, they're not, because more than half of them are brand new. I have a couple who are still struggling with belonging and a bunch of learners. And so, no, we're not challenging things. We're still trying to get a handle on things. So there's no right or wrong answer here, but I want you to start thinking about yourself and your role in your team and other team members of yours. And how do you think your team as a whole functions? Okay. So, and here we go. So this is just a little poster from the Center for Creative Leadership about how can you create psychological safety, or help to create it or maintain it in your organization or on your team. And so they have 5 steps here, and we're going to go through those for just a second. But what you want is to help other staff members, other employees move through these 4 stages and ultimately land in a place where they feel comfortable with interpersonal risk-taking, saying things that they're not positive everybody already knows or understands, speaking up, asking questions. Leaders should really nurture and promote their team's sense of psychological safety in the workplace. And how can we do that? So number 1, make it an explicit priority. Talk about the importance of feeling safe here with us. Talk about the reasons that we came up with all the benefits at the beginning of this part of the training to talk about all the benefits of having a safe space to do your work and make mistakes and those sorts of things. And we had a lot of benefits. So talk about that. We want to get to this place where we're benefiting. And so this is important to us. There's a higher purpose of promoting organizational involvement. You want innovative ideas. You want team engagement. You want a sense of inclusion. So you model the behaviors you want to see and say the things that you're working towards or working on. Okay. Number 2, facilitate everybody speaking up. So show genuine curiosity and empathy in your workplace. Honor candor and truth-telling if people are saying things that, okay, but honor that. They're taking a little risk there. They're saying something that is maybe unexpected, but can you be open-minded? Can you be compassionate? Can you listen? Can you just listen? And when somebody is brave enough to say something that doesn't fit where your team has been or doesn't fit the current status quo, it is a little challenging. And so show genuine curiosity, be open to hearing things. And then honestly, if you're the person running the meeting, if you're running a team meeting, notice the people who are not talking. Just think about that for a second. Notice them. As a matter of fact, if you have trouble or if you have a lot of people in your meeting, there's a strategy where you just have a list of the people at the meeting and you put a little tick mark every time they talk. You just put a mark there. You're not rating their talking. You're just noting their contribution. Okay, they said something. Oh, they said something again. And then as you get halfway or 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through your meeting, who has not spoken? And can you turn to them directly and say, hey, Bianca, we haven't heard anything from you for a little while. What did you think about Natalie's plan? And at least give her the opportunity, the opening, the invitation to have her 2 cents put into the conversation. Now, it might startle people at first, but they will totally get used to this. And look at your list. And if you have people who aren't saying anything, ask them to say something out loud. It's not that huge a commitment or a request if you're a team that works together with any regularity. And you're saying, you're important to me too. You're important to this team, and you probably have something to contribute. Do they always? No. Will they pass sometimes? Yes. But just because they pass occasionally doesn't mean we should stop asking. So that's what it means when it says facilitate everyone speaking up. It's up to you if you notice somebody who isn't speaking up to say, hey, what do you think about this? Number 3, establish norms for how failure is handled. So remember those mistakes that people roll their eyes at or laugh at or think, how could you have done that? Please establish norms for how failure is handled. And you can say out loud, we tolerate mistakes on this team because we're always trying to get better and do better. And once in a while, that comes with mistakes. Don't punish experimentation or reasonable risk-taking. Listen, they're not, just because people make, I'm saying people can make mistakes, it doesn't mean they're allowed to break the rules or the laws, right? I'm not giving permission for that. That's not the kind of mistake we're talking about. You still are not going to date your clients. You still are not going to take money out of the team coffers. There are just rules and laws about things. But reasonable risk-taking, trying something new, seeing if you could get somebody to budge. Encourage learning from failure and disappointment. What did you learn from that? How might you do it differently next time? Rather than saying, well, that was wrong, and here's what you should have done. How about, doesn't sound like that worked out so well for you. What might you try differently next time? As opposed to, you made a mistake, now I'm going to tell you how to do it. Do you see the big difference there? And openly share your own hard-won lessons and how you learned from mistakes. Doing so will help encourage other people to be more open about it. It will also encourage innovation, trying different and new things instead of sabotaging it, telling on somebody who didn't do something exactly the way everybody else is doing it. That's sabotaging or making mistakes problematic. And by the way, if we want to try to stay away from failure or people having completely failed. And so try replacing failure. And on that form, it says, establish norms for how failure is handled. And I want to encourage you to replace that word with mistakes. Okay? It's very unlikely that a mistake causes a complete failure of all the things. And so instead, let's just call it what it is. It's a mistake. And what'd you learn? And how can we move past it or change it or now make better decisions? That sort of thing. Number 4, create space for new ideas, even wild ones. I love saying that if we didn't have people coming up with wild ideas about something, we all wouldn't have smartphones in our pockets. I mean, that's like Star Trek stuff. How did we end up with that in my lifetime? It's kind of wild. Okay, so make space for new, even wild ideas. When challenging an idea, provide the challenge in the larger context of support. That sounds super interesting, but how might we have to work that out? Or how can we get funding to do something like that? You definitely will get to work faster in a helicopter, but how will we pay for that? So you can support an idea and not have to fully buy into it, right? So consider whether you only want ideas that have been thoroughly tested and proven, or whether you're actually willing to accept highly creative, out-of-the-box ideas that might not be perfectly formulated yet. Okay. And then finally, number 5 is about embracing productive conflict. You can't be on a team for very long without having a conflict. And I don't mean you personally, but somewhere within the team, there's going to be something. Somebody's going to disagree with somebody else, or there's going to be some minor scuffle or conflict. Okay. And what do we do about that? For that one, I have a whole nother slide. We have to embrace what we call productive conflict. So conflict when people are just being mean and attacking other people, that's not what we're talking about. Conflict when I say, I think in order to get this project off the ground, we're going to have to do this. But Alicia says, no, Bobby, I don't think that's going to be the way to do it. We have to do this first, or you can't do that thing at all. Okay, so there's some sort of conflict going on, but you don't want to label it as awful or unwanted, because we're hearing 2 or 3 perspectives about things, and that can really stir up a lot of thoughts and ideas. So you want to promote dialogue and productive debate. If nobody ever says, I'm not sure about that idea, there's never any dialogue or debate. If somebody brings up an idea and people just say yes or no and go off and do it, that's probably a very strong supervisor behind that. And they aren't really open to other people's ideas and things. You have to be open to the occasional disagreement or conflict. And then you can work out how to resolve them with some cooperation and letting people express themselves. So you're going to set the stage for what we think of as incremental change by establishing team expectations for factors that contribute to all of these psychological safety ideas. Okay. But we have to know that conflict is part of human nature. Conflict is part of, I want to say it's whenever you have 2 or more people, you're going to have some sort of conflict occasionally. But I also think that you can even have a conflict in yourself. I want to do this, but I'm not doing the things to get me there. I want some target or goal, but I don't have the discipline to make myself. I wanted to play an instrument in elementary and middle school. No way did I have the discipline, and I definitely didn't have the talent. And so you can have internal conflict. You can have team conflict. You can have permanent conflict, but make it productive. Invite people's opinions, okay? And yet again, I'm going to put you into a breakout room to discuss how to tolerate and embrace conflict. And here are your questions this time. How will team members communicate their concerns if they see a process as it isn't working? Have you seen that happen? Have you had people say, I don't think this is working, or I tried it and it doesn't work that well for me? And is there space on your teams for people to say things like that? How can people share their concerns or reservations about something a colleague says without looking like they're insulting them or trying not to take their ideas seriously? How can we share concerns without looking like we're blocking things? And what are your norms for managing conflicting perspectives? So if you have conflict, how do you already try to resolve it? What do you do? Do you ignore it? Do you meet in? There are the people who sort of do the divide and conquer thing. So let's say 2 people are having, Bianca's on one side of it, Natalie's on the other side of it. I'll go have private conversation with Bianca. Then I'll have a private conversation with Natalie. Then I'll try to see where there's ground that they can come together and see if I can't. That's a little complicated, and it doesn't always work the way you think it's going to work. And so are there other strategies for managing legitimate conflicts, not fights, conflicts and differences of opinion? Okay. So I want you to discuss how does your team currently communicate concerns, share those concerns, and manage conflicting perspectives. Okay. If you do it at all, or are you going to come back and say, we ignore conflict, or we don't have any conflict, which is kind of hard to believe, but we'll see what happens. This next slide is called the 7-Day Psychological Safety Challenge. So for people who are newer to this concept and would, but kind of like the idea of understanding how teams work most effectively together, means that they go through these stages. And if you want a highly productive and team that feels some sense of belonging, you might want to try some psychological safety strategies. And so these are some steps to try. And even though it says Monday through Sunday, first of all, I happen to know you're not working on 7 days a week, which is good. And secondly, you could pick any one of these things to give it a try and see how these things work out. You could also look at this list real quickly and think about, what do I want more of from my team? Do I want them to think big and give me ideas? Then use the Monday idea. Do I want them to be more reflective before they open their mouths and say things? Then let's do a little reflection time. Do I have only 2 or 3 people on my team of 6 who actually say things? Then let's ask the other people to do something specific to contribute to the group and see how that goes. So you could see how you could pick this apart. You could do them in order. You can try something. If you have a once a week meeting, try one of them each week for 7 different weeks and see what helps your team. So take small, incremental, intentional steps to increase psychological safety in your workplace by using some of these challenge ideas. It is definitely one of your handouts. You don't have to look at the PowerPoint to get it. But you could apply things one by one and just try them out. Some of them will feel okay to you, and others of them you will not have as much interest in, or maybe your team's already good at it, at something in particular. So you don't have to work that hard at it. That takes us to the last section, and you will be out of here in about 8 minutes. So hang in there with me. And that is, folks, you have to model self-care so that the people around you also do self-care. And I know you've probably heard a lot about this in the last year or two, but it's worth talking about because people give it some lip service and then they go on with their same old bad work habits. They work through lunch and they take, they're on call too much or whatever it is. And so we will all be better performers and better contributors if we take a minute to take care of ourselves first. And I guess I shouldn't say take a minute. You have to take some serious effort to take care of yourself. Okay. And there are several handouts for you. And if you were part of the last training I did a couple of weeks ago, we spent some time going over self-care stuff, but I really tuck it into almost everything I do. So almost all the topics I teach, we wrap up with some self-reflection and how do we take care of ourselves and do the things that we're talking about. If you want to apply all the things that I just talked about for the last 2 hours, you have to be strong enough and alert enough to be able to do those things. And so self-care is really the only way through that. So here's that Audre Lorde quote that self-care is not self-indulgence. It's not like, I don't feel like working this afternoon, so I'm going to get ice cream and have my nails done. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about caring enough for yourself that you eat healthily, that you get a good night's sleep, that you stay connected to people who are important to you. Okay. And so when you think about self-care, what do you think about when you hear those words? What do you think about when you think about having to do it? And do you recognize that you and your work generation is different than former work generations who did think self-care was sort of self-indulgent and they just didn't have any concept for how important that was. So I want you to think about who benefits besides you from you taking care of yourself. And hopefully you're all answering in your head, everyone around me. If I take really good care of myself, I'm a better person for every other person around me in my world. Okay. Whether you have kids that you take care of, spouses or parents that you take care of, teams that you try to lead, or customers that you're trying to serve. When you take care of yourself, everyone else benefits from it. So you know this slide because you probably saw it at the Trauma Informed Care. These are the core components of self-care. It's not magic. Everybody knows what these things are now. And you really have to think about which one should you be focusing a little more time and energy on. So that's what I'd like you to do right this second. We're not going into another breakout room. We're done with those for today. But if you look at this list, what is one of them that you could do a little bit more of? No one's perfect at self-care, and everybody could improve. And so which one could you try a little bit harder at, or change one little thing about yourself? Is it something that you eat? Is it going to bed 10 minutes earlier? Is it checking in with your best friend and talking, having some reflective conversations about taking care of yourself, and how do you take care of yourself? And oh my gosh, it seems like it's a whole nother job these days. And connecting with the people that you love and who love you. Ultimately, I think it's at the bottom of the list, healthy relationships. But I think for me, it's the most sustaining thing there is. If I'm really struggling, reaching out to somebody that I know and trust is almost always my go-to. And I have a bunch of different people. It depends on what my problem is, who I reach out to, right? And so think about those relationships and where you might tweak it a little bit to get better. I also want to talk just for 1 minute about getting outside. There are so many healing benefits from being outside in natural green space. Now, I gave you a blue picture, not a green picture, but it's the same idea. Raise your eyes up to the horizon. Take a walk in a forest. Go on a long hike. Don't be afraid of or avoid the weather. Walk in the rain, play in the puddles, do all the things. When we are out in nature, it is self-regulating. It helps your body absorb or let go of stress so that you can go back fresh and refreshed for another day of serving and helping others.